What's happening, YouTube? So it's a nice Saturday. I'm cruising around running some errands. Do a little side work. I work with my uncle on tending a few community pools. So today was payday. Just picked up some cash from that. That'll help pay for Firebird build. Been thinking lately about what rear end I want to run in the car. As most people know, the 10 bolts in those cars are junk. They seems like GM kind of worked backwards, at least from my opinion, on how hot rods should be built. Typically you build back to front, where you build a rear end and put a rear end in the car that can hold, if not but more than your setup's gonna produce, and they really didn't do a good job on what rear end they put in those cars. They carried on the 7.5 inch ring gear 10 bolt that was done in the 3rd gen cars, and the 3rd gen cars made pretty lousy power, so I could see why they'd run them in those cars, but man, they do not belong in the 4th gens. So this car came with the 342 gear 10 bolt, just like all the 6-speed cars came with. Every 1LE had a 6-speed, and behind it they put a grenade. The ticking time bomb waiting to go off is the stock 10 bolt, and I'm going to pull this out of this car before it has a chance to blow up. The L21 made some good torque. The LS1 kind of put that over the edge as far as what the 10 bolt can hold, especially behind a manual transmission. As most of you probably know, a manual transmission is a solid mechanical coupling from clutch through transmission to drive shaft to rear end. There's no slipping, there's no torque converter like there is in an automatic to absorb the shock of a launch or a sudden burst of throttle like there is in a converter would do. So with an automatic you have a torque converter, and it's fluid coupled, so you always have it, it's always spinning, it's full of fluid, it's always spinning, so there's always a constant load on the drivetrain. Well, with the clutch, it's an on-off switch, and you slip it, and it works kind of like a converter by slipping it, but it's still, to work optimum, it's a mechanical operation that is on or off. When that happens, you need something stronger in the rear end, which is stronger rear end components, to actually absorb the shock of the launch. I'm planning on the car being drivable everywhere, meaning I'm gonna drive it to events, not trailer it. It's a street car. I'm gonna drive it in the street. I'm gonna drive it to where I'm gonna race it. I'd love to do a half mile. I think I can gear the car to do a half mile. I'd love to do that type of event. Even a roll race scenario would be cool. Lots of different ideas. So drag racing, autocross, roll racing events, airstrip events, things of that nature. I don't think the car will ever be set up for road racing. I'd have to keep the car basically in stock form with some tweaking as far as the cooling ability of the car to stay cool under those circumstances. I don't think the car will ever have the cooling ability to keep up with, high horsepower forced induction on a road course. It's pretty much impossible. So I'll just stick with the cones in the parking lot. It'll be fun. As far as the rear end selection goes, the 10 bolt still wouldn't hold up to the power I want to make and the abuse the car's going to receive. When I say abuse, I guess I mean the action it's going to see. It's going to see all types of racing eventually. And initially it's easy to set up the car to be able to go straight, just because, you're more inclined to just go in a straight line. I don't plan on launching the car on a slick. Drag radials work okay on 6-speed cars on manual transmissions, but due to the hardness of the sidewall of a tire of a drag radial, it seems like, really the only drag radial that has any kind of cushion to it is a Hoosier drag radial. They're softer, they're lighter, but they don't last as long, and they're not really that street friendly. They have 2 grooves in them, and they don't really do much for water channeling if you get stuck out in the rain. The other options are typical off-the-shelf rear ends, which would be like a 12 bolt or a Ford 9-inch. So the 12 bolt is an easy go-to, but I've heard from several different guys over the years that a 12 bolt will develop gear wind faster than a 9-inch will. I think it has to do with the pinion and how it's mounted rather than the actual gears. A 9-inch would be the option I would go with between the two, just because of that. I don't want the thing to be whiny and loud. I'd rather it be pretty quiet. Since I'm a little more concerned about weight, trying to keep the weight down on this thing, even though I'll add a power adder and that'll add some weight, I don't think I want to go with a 12 bolt. It's hard to lighten them up. You can make a 9-inch lighter, use lighter components to make it more weight friendly. I priced them out and they're kind of high. But then the wild card rear end that I have actually in my possession that I'm really leaning towards using, I've had for a while. It's a 373 geared Ford 8.8 rear end that came in a car I bought about 5 years ago. I bought the car on a whim. It was a modded car. It was a Sunset Orange Metallic 01 Z28. It had some miles on it, but it was very modified. It had a 6-liter with LS3 heads on it, had a turbo 400 transmission, and it had this Ford 8.8 rear end in it. And so it's got an Eaton posi in it. It's got 31 spline axles. I believe they're bolt-in axles. I'll find out when we get in there. But it's been sitting in my garage for 5 years, and I never really had issues with it, but the car had issues and some vibration, and I'm hoping it wasn't caused by the rear end. I guess what I'll do is have it gone through, do a gear swap in it, and I think that the Ford 8.8 rear will be the best option for me, mainly due to the weight versus which power to turn it, and also the fact that I've already got it. It's more budget. Basically everything I can think of points to use this thing and make it work for what I want to do. So my plan is to use this old nasty looking rear end as you see here. This is a picture of it out of that car. It had been painted. It needs to be recoated. I've used different coatings in the past. I'll probably slap a layer of POR 15 on it. You can get a really cool little kit. It's basically like a starter kit for POR 15 that comes with a pint of POR 15 in whatever color you want. You can use gloss, semi-gloss, or flat. I'll probably go with the semi-gloss just for a little bit of shine, but not too blingy. And then it comes with this stuff called Metal Ready. It's a little bottle of stuff that you put in, mix in with water, put in like a spray bottle. You spray the rear end all down. It works as kind of like a degreaser, and it gets the metal ready. That's what it's called. It preps the metal for paint, for that paint. And so the POR just applies with a brush. So you can go to the hardware store, you know, scour the garage, find some old brushes, paint brushes, and just go to town. You have to make sure the rear is, you know, dry before you put the POR on it. So what I'll do is I'll hose it down, use that POR or use the Metal Ready, hose it down and get that all off of there, and then just let it dry overnight, make sure it's good and dry, and then I'll slap 2 layers of the POR 15 on it. It goes on kind of thin. It doesn't leave any brush marks, so that's really good. It's easy to apply, and it looks nice, and it's rock hard when it's done, so that's awesome. It won't strip or crack or peel or come off like this crap is that's on there right now. Hopefully the axles are in good shape. Hopefully the housing is in good shape, and we'll go from there. So what my plan is I've got a friend of mine. She had some 390s redone by a local guy, and I'm going to have him go through the thing. I don't plan on going with a lot of gear, meaning I don't want it to be numerically higher. I plan on it being numerically lower, and that would be called a higher gear. Confusing, I know. So I'd go with somewhere between a 3.0, a 3.0, and a 350 gear. And the reason I'm not sure about that is because I want the car to do well with regardless of what transmission I put in it. I'm leaning toward a 325 gear area. It could be somewhere around like a 327, a 331, maybe even as low or, you know, as high as the numerically lower, higher gear, like a 308 gear. I know they make a 308 gear for either of those. There's there's different ideas and different theories on what ring and pinion to go with, what ratio to go with, but I think a 327 would do me just fine in any transmission scenario. So it's kind of a foolproof idea. I mean, if I went with the T56, pressed my luck, went with the T56, went with the twin disc clutch, tried to just be easy with the car, not drag race it as often, just enjoy the car, take it to these events I'm talking about, and just not really be competitive, just to go out and have fun, then the 6-speed could possibly work. I have to be very careful with it. That's option 1. Option 2 is going with the 4L80E. The 4L60 would not hold the power. I don't want to even consider that idea. I've seen them hold like 600, 700 tire pretty reasonably in the past, but they cost a lot to build, and then you have another $1,000 in a converter, which I'm not so sure about. So that's out. The 4L80 is the next option. The 4L80 would be a possible go-to. I've been reading more and more about thrust bearings being pushed due to running too high of a fluid pressure in them. It has to do with the converter ballooning. There again, to buy a converter that doesn't do that, you're looking at $1,000. So I don't know if I want to spend $1,000 on a converter and then end up spending, I don't know, $1,000 in buying a 4L80 or maybe one that just works and having it gone through. I guess the best option would be buying one that works, going through it and doing like an HD2 shift kit, which is a possibility. But there again, the hard parts have to be good, and who do you trust on that? Do you buy one that you have been told it's got good stuff in it, or been told that it works just fine? I mean, I've done that before, and I've been burned. Sadly, I bought one a few years ago. I was going to use it on a build. I parted the build. I sold it to a guy, told him what I knew about it. Then I get a call back a month or two later saying he put it in his truck and there's no gears. It doesn't even go into gear. There's nothing there. It's like it's a dead case. I don't know if I want to deal with that myself. I don't know if I want to try and find one that supposedly has good stuff in it and then get burned. So the last option, like a Turbo 350 or Turbo 400. Now the Turbo 350 would be a good deal if I can find one that's very built or have it built. The problem with that is they don't hold up to as much power as a 400. The good thing is they take less power to turn. So really, the 350 would be the most efficient of the two transmissions for a 3-speed and give up the overdrive. But the downside, obviously, is giving up the overdrive. So if I geared the rear end with a 327 gear and I was running a 26-inch tire at 70 miles an hour with either of those 3 speeds, I'd be turning around like 2800 RPM at 70, which sounds like a lot, but really it's not too bad considering the fact that if you have a 410 gear set in one of these cars with the 4L60 overdrive transmission, the automatic overdrive that came in these cars, you're still going to be turning like 2700 with a 410 gear at 70 miles an hour. So really the 327 gears would work pretty similarly to a 410 gear 4L60 scenario in one of these cars. So really it wouldn't be too bad looking at it that way. I've been in a car with 410s before. I've had a 373 geared car before. Another angle too is if I'm going to drag race the car, I'm going to keep all the suspension underneath it that's good for, autocross, and keep it basically just like it is as far as suspension goes. But I'm going to run a 28-inch tire for drag racing. I think it'll just do better. So if I do that, that keeps the revs down even more on the street. So not that I'm going to run around on a drag race all the time, but I mean, if I'm going out with some friends, going out and thinking that there's going to be some street fun, I'll likely be on the 28s. I'll likely have it on a good tire. That's kind of my scenario of thinking here is, even with a 3-speed, it wouldn't be that bad. And between the Turbo 350 and Turbo 400, the Turbo 400 is likely what I would build, mainly because it's got better parts going in, obviously in it. It's basically a 4L80 with an overdrive, and that's how I built the 4L80. It was the Turbo 400 with an overdrive gear. So I'll go if I go with a 400, I would go with a PTC converter. And I've talked to a guy named Dusty Bradford with PTC, and he's a great guy, and he's very informative on what works and what doesn't. I told him, my idea of going with a 5.3. I told him about what size cam I was going to go with. I told him that I wanted to go with, you know, likely a turbo kit. Power goals would be like 700 plus to the tire. Told him every scenario I want to do with the car, and I told him I still want to have the handling ability. It's not going to be a dedicated drag car. So he told me that, you know, really the $500 10-inch converter that they offer would work for my combination. It should do what I want it to do. It should be tight out of boost, which would be great on an autocross course. If it's not flashing all the time and it's pretty consistent, especially out of boost. So there you've got, you know, $1,000 to $1,200 for a 4L80 converter, or you've got $500 in a 400 converter. They'll basically do the same thing. Now, PTC does offer a 9-inch converter that's good for like 800 plus, but he told me 800 was kind of the threshold. And what he means by 800 is 800 horsepower to the tires, which is a ton of power. I mean, a lot of these guys, you know, they make a lot of power, these cars that are, you know, the 5th gens or heavier cars, but I mean, my car's light. It's going to be, you know, with me in it, it's going to be like 3,500 pounds. So we're talking 500 pounds lighter than most of the cars that you see making, you know, 1,000 plus. The car will be as fast or faster than those cars as far as mile an hour if everything works right. I guess it's safe to say that an automatic is definitely going to happen. There's a buddy of mine that I've done some buying and selling of parts with before that has a Turbo 400 core that he told me he would give me for free. So I'll probably go with that and get the core no matter what I do. Now, if I change my mind, I'm not out anything because I could just sell the core or give it to somebody else. So the cool thing about it is it's out of a 87 Chevy truck, so it's got the electronic speedometer, which is awesome. So if I, you know, want to have an electronic speedometer and have the speedometer retained, all I've got to do is play the games on trying to get the connector to fit. We can kind of play games with HP tuners and maybe make it work as is if the connector is compatible with the harness that came out of the car. If I take the spring out of the wastegate, it won't make near as much power, so the converter should hopefully be very tight, and that would work well in that scenario. It sounds like I've kind of settled on my setup. My next step is to get that 10 bolt out of the car. Started tearing down the motor. I'll do some more updates on that. But basically where I'm at right now is going through the motor, taking the rear end out of the car. Make sure to tune in for more videos and more updates in the future. I'll get some more action videos showing of, you know, putting stuff together, and obviously get the rear end going, and I'll get some updates on that. So click subscribe, like the videos. I hope y'all are enjoying the channel so far. Take care. Have a great day.